So this might be something like, kind of talked about the first week, but we can maybe go a little deeper and just really make sure some of these concepts are solidified. I am going to do one new thing. I'm going to do like a brief intro with TypeScript. So we'll do a little TypeScript, but we'll kind of wait for that. So I'm going to make a directory called week 7. And I'm just going to go ahead and open this up in code. Just going to go ahead and open up. Well, actually, let's do. Yeah, we can just open this up in code. I don't know if I'll have any projects in here for now, but let's just do like a review.js. Okay. So when we're talking about coding fundamentals, I think there's a couple things like we're going to want to have, we should be getting a lot more familiar with these things like variables, data types, or structures. You can call them data types or data structures, functions, and then like I'm just going to say loops and control flow. These are kind of some of the basic things we've talked about with variables. Variables are essentially just like named data. And with JavaScript, we have let, const, and var. So this is old. We're not going to use that. So with a variable, a variable has a name, it has a type, has a value, it has a scope. And when you think of scope, where is it visible? That's kind of what scope is. Scope is kind of talking about like where is this variable visible, or where is it accessible. So we have a variable with a name. This one's called number. It has a value is 1. That value has a type, which is number. Now, I think this is the type. I think this can be a little confusing when you first start, how important the type is when we get to when we're coding, because when I think of this variable num, I don't really think this is the value 1. It's just kind of like a name placeholder for the value 1, but it's also a number. So that means, I can do stuff that I can do with numbers like divide. So with the number, I can do division. With the number, I can do multiplication. I can subtract. I can add. Now, with languages like JavaScript and Ruby, they're not typed languages, meaning we don't have to kind of worry about what type this is, or we don't have to keep track of it. Now, that's nice because we have less code to write, but then it's bad because we can do things like this in JavaScript, where I can say like number plus, you know, the string hello. I can just run this. This works. Why is this bad that this works?
Because you're trying to add something that you can't actually add because they're not both numbers.
Yeah. Because this is, and yeah, unless I wanted to do that for some, I might want to do that, but yeah, it's potentially bad because I'm taking something that's a type number and I'm adding it to a string. And it's actually working because it's just doing string concatenation.
So that would be like the 1 + 1 = 11.
Yeah, because maybe, I mean, this is a, you know, kind of silly example, but let's say like I had like a bank app where I had a balance that was a number, and then I had a deposit amount that was a string. For some reason, you know, I get the deposit, it comes back as a string. I have a balance that is a number. So I do something like this. New balance equals, you know, my deposit plus balance. And then, yeah, that's all of a sudden 11. You know, when I was coding this, because sometimes when you're coding, you're not going to see that this is a string. You'd have some method called like get deposit. You know, defined somewhere else. You know, probably in another file that you don't even see, or maybe you didn't even write. So it'd be more like this. You'd say like let deposit equal get deposit. So here's what your code would look like, because then you would like import get deposit. And as far as your code looks, this looks good. It's like, oh, I'm getting the deposit amount, store that to a variable, then I can just add that to my balance. And then you get this, and then you log it and you see that it's 11, and you're like, oh, sweet, that's working. But lo and behold, that's like a string, and that's the wrong string anyway. So this can be a downside of untyped languages, is that there's no type checking. So when I talk about variables, you know, they have a type, and this is really important. And it's even more so important in JavaScript, because you as the coder, you kind of have to, you know, keep kind of track of what type everything is in your own head. It's kind of up to you. But this can cause problems like this. So there's a, so what has becoming more and more popular is this superset of JavaScript called Typescript. So people have created a typed version of JavaScript that is called Typescript. Has anyone heard of Typescript before? Seen that? So that's kind of what I want to use this Typescript editor just to, I think it's going to be a good way to do a review of JavaScript, but it's also, can kind of learn a little of not like why this might be useful. So go ahead and just Google Typescript. And really, if you can Google the Typescript playground, and I can also just Slack this out. This is, and I'm going to get rid of this. This is what we want. This is just an editor we can use really quick. So we don't have to like set up Typescript, because there is a little bit of setup if we want to use it. So is that, this link takes you here. So click on this try Typescript link. And then we're just going to do in the browser via the playground. And now we can have like this Typescript editor. So if, and let me see if I can make this text bigger. So yeah, here on the left, we just have a console where we can, or we have an editor where we can write Typescript. And if you look at this, I can just delete these comments. This just is JavaScript, right? We have a const, we have a variable, and then we're console.logging it. So I can run this. And on my right side in this logs, I have this, I'm able to see my log. There's also a .js file. So technically, a TypeScript file is going to have a .ts extension. But what's going to happen is it's going to get compiled, or it's going to get changed into a JavaScript function. So we can write TypeScript here, and then this browser is going to automatically convert it to a JavaScript function, or a JavaScript file, so we can actually run it. Because a browser like Chrome doesn't know how to run TypeScript. So we write TypeScript, but then we need something to compile that to just JavaScript. Does that make sense? So even when we write TypeScript, there needs to be something just to convert that to vanilla JavaScript. So with this editor, we can kind of see what this code is being compiled down to. Sweet. So let's go back to kind of this, or something similar to this example. Let's try doing this. So I'm going to come in here. I'm going to say let X. But what I can do with TypeScript is I can give it a type. I'm going to say, hey, X is going to be a number. And then I can say like let Y, I could have that be a string. Now, TypeScript's technically smart enough to like do like kind of figure out that X is a number, right? It's be like, oh, X equals 1, 1's a number. But I'm just going to write these down because this is the syntax on how you do this. Say let X colon is a number, Y colon string, that's a string. If I try to say like, you know, Y is a string and then set it equal to a number, that's not going to let me do that. But declaring this as a string, if later in my code, I try to set Y equal to the number 1, I'm going to get an error. Let me see. And if I try to run this, well, let's see if this works. Let's do a console.log just here. This is a little, this normally kind of shouldn't be. I mean, I'm getting an error. So it's still allowing me to run this, but if this was like a React project, this would actually not build because I have an error. This is an error and it's saying right here, you know, you're trying to convert something that is a type string to a number. And so this would, you know, break your code. And you get an error. And we can see that error right there. Because the whole point of TypeScript is, you know, you're saying, I should probably never in my code set Y equal to anything other than a string. Cool. So let's, and you know, so let's kind of have some meaningful variable names. So I could say like deposit, where we're doing that. Let's do our function. So we had a function. I'm going to say this const get deposit amount. There's my function. And this is going to return. Now, for whatever reason, let's just still say this returns a string. I can actually, on my function, I can say that, hey, this function returns a string. Again, if I say this function returns a number, now I'm going to get an error. Because TypeScript's smart enough to be like, oh, you're saying this function should return a number, but it's returning a string. So let's have it return a string. So then I might do something like this, where I'd say let deposit, you know, I want that to be a number. And I'm going to say, let's have that equal to get deposit amount. And now all of a sudden, TypeScript is letting me know, hey, this is not going to be a number, because get deposit, if I hover over this, it's, let me just do it like this. If I hover over get deposit, see how it has the function and it's the arrow is a string. It's letting me know, hey, this get deposit amount returns a string. So then I could be like, oh, okay, well, let's say you know, well, I want to do this dot to, and notice something else. When I, here I have a get deposit amount, and I'm going to do the dot note, just do a dot. Now I'm getting, what, let me ask you this question. What do all these methods look like?
String method?
Yeah, these are all string methods. Because TypeScript knows that this get deposit amount is a string. So if I do a dot on this, this is going to be just a whole bunch of string methods. That's pretty cool, actually. This is one of the nice things about TypeScript is like you get a lot more Intellisense. It's like, oh, this is a string. Like it just knows this is a string. I'm like, if I do this same thing in JavaScript, you know, I can't do that. It's not going to know what that is. This is a JavaScript file. Like that doesn't, like, you know, this, I'm doing a dot on that. It doesn't know this is a string. If I hover over this, well, actually, this, once again, this is smart enough to, it's kind of like implicitly figuring out that like this is a string because I'm returning this, but it's not, you're usually not going to like return something that's just hard coded like that. So I can hover over this. It's smart enough to infer that it's returning a string. But when I do the dot, it's not giving me those string methods. So there's my get deposit amount. And yeah, if I do this, I can see all those string methods. But then I, you know, I can say, well, I still want this to be a string or an integer or a number in JavaScript. So I can just do something like parse int. And then I could have my balance be a string. Well, let's just see this error first. So let's say my balance is a string. And let's just say this is 100. And I'm not even going to give this a type. And then I could do something like this, like balance plus equals, you know, balance, or let's just do like, right, like this, balance equals balance plus deposit. See, even though I'm not saying the type of deposit, it knows deposit is a string, and I'm saying balance, I said balance is a number, and I'm doing balance plus deposit. Well, it knows deposit is a string because I said this get deposit amount returns a string. So then it knows, hey, I'm going to be reassigning balance to a string. So it's giving me these errors. You know, because if I log my balance, that's, you know, not going to be correct. It's 1,001. It should just be 101. But normally, like I said, this is an error. We have a big old error right here. It's highlighted, hey, you have a problem right here. So like, oh, okay, yep, that's an issue. I need to parse that. That needs to be an integer. Now that warning's gone, when I run this, I get my expected, 101. Cool. And this can, I think like TypeScript is a great way to do this review because I mean, here is a function. Our function definition. So we can think of functions as, taking in data, optional. That's optional. This function is actually not taking in any data and, doing stuff. Stuff. Why is that auto completing, and returning data? But just like as important it was with like our variables, having this type, it's really important to kind of think about this with our functions as well. What type of data is our function returning? So let's do another example down here. I'm going to just comment out these logs down here. I'm going to make a function. I'm going to do my add function that we've always done, but we'll do this in TypeScript. Oh, I have an extra equal sign there. And that. So I'm getting an error. So a function whose declared type is neither void nor any must return a value. So this is saying I'm not returning a number, essentially. So let's return num1 plus num2. And that gets rid of that error. So let's just really hammer this home with the functions. So this is a function definition. This is my add function. It's taking in data. These are optional, called parameters. Then we do stuff, and then we return data. So I have an add function that has two parameters, num1 and num2. The type with TypeScript, I can actually declare the types that I want these to be. I want this to be a number. I want num2 to be a number. And then I want this function to return a number. If I try to return a string, that's not going to work. If I make one of these a string, see how TypeScript's smart enough to be like, oh, that's not going to be a string. And I can come down here and do like let sum equal add 1 and 2. If I come in here and I say let sum equal add 1 and the string 2, now I'm going to get an error. If I say let sum2 equal, remember my get deposit amount returns a string. That's going to be an error. Because it knows it's going to call this function and it knows that's going to return a string. If I have another get deposit amount number that returns a number, let's just do math dot random. See, TypeScript knows that math.random returns a number. So I can do get deposit amount number, that works. And likewise, I could say like let balance, or let's just redeclare here. Balance equals balance plus sum2. TypeScript knows, because it knows that add returns a number, so it knows that sum2 is going to be a number. If I hover over it, it says it's it's implicitly going to say this is a number. But without TypeScript, and this is kind of why we're not going to be really using TypeScript in the course, but I think it's good to talk about because without TypeScript, you have to be doing this yourself in your head or like in your code. Like when you're writing an add function or you're defining a function and you're defining the parameters, the more you can just kind of in your mind be like, okay, I have an add function and I'm expecting this to be a number and I'm expecting this to be a number and I'm expecting this function to return a number. That's kind of what you have to do when you're writing code. So if I go just to my normal JavaScript file, I could, num1, num2. Let sum equals add 1 and so like if I do this in just a JavaScript file, this is not going to break. But when you wrote that add function, you're like, okay, this add function can only take numbers. This parameter has to be or this argument has to be a number. This argument has to be a number. Does that make sense? Because TypeScript is going to like force you to like declare the types. In JavaScript, you don't have to. But if you're not really, that's good and bad because it's less code you have to write. And you don't have to learn TypeScript, but then you're setting yourself up to do stuff like this. Which this is a really bad error. Because it doesn't break. Like, okay, yes, like this is syntactically, semantically correct code. But that is definitely like going to cause an error down the line somewhere. Because 1 + 1 is not the string 11, it should be 2. Cool. Let's keep going with TypeScript. I'm just gonna, let me select this out and then I'm gonna delete it just to clean this up. Let's talk about arrays and kind of do a little review on arrays. So I can come in here and make an array. Now with JavaScript, we can have mixed types. You know, we can have an array of numbers, but I could maybe have I can have strings and numbers in this array. Like we can mix data types. Sometimes that's maybe what you want to do. For example, with like our use state hook. Our use state hook returns, you know, mixed match data because it's going to return some data and then it's going to return a function. But a lot of the times you want your arrays to be a specific type of data. Like I want an array of numbers or I want an array of strings. Because this is probably, you know, likely could be bad. To have some numbers, but then to have some strings thrown in that. And see, once again, TypeScript is smart enough to infer things. So it's saying, hey, you have a number array, or you have this variable called num, and it is an array of strings or numbers. But let's say we want nums just to be an array of numbers. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to say, hey, I'm going to declare the type. This is an array of number. I did this the wrong way. It's number array. Cool. So I'm saying this variable num should be a number array. And now I'm getting errors here because I have strings inside of here. I am just going to throw this add function back up here. So I have it. How come, like, so this is a number array. How come I can throw this function call inside of here? This is acceptable TypeScript.
It's going to return as a number.
Yeah. Add this. This is just, you know, 3. It's just, you know, that is going to call the function and it's, you know, once this evaluates, it's going to call this and it's just going to put 3 there. So that's valid. If I had my, let me just for a demo, have a function called return string. This doesn't really need to like do anything. I'm just going to say, hey, this function returns a string. Let this return go. If I come in here and throw that function in here, there's an error. Because hey, that's trying to put a string in my number array. So that doesn't work. TypeScript's going to see that. Cool. So now I can do a, like, if I type nums and I do a dot, well, now I'm getting all of my array methods. So let's do a numbers dot, let's just do a for each. So for each, I'm going to go through nums dot for each, and I got to give this a function, x. Let's see, and then I'm just going to do like a console.log x. Or let's do this. Let's do console.log add x and 1. If I hover over x, it's saying x is a number. How does it know? And to kind of show this, I can do my add x. So I'm doing a for each. I'm calling my add x and 1. No error. If I have a, let's do a string array. Let's make this an array of strings. I'll keep on hitting Command S. Call this STRs. If I try to do the same thing with my strings array, this is not going to work. TypeScript, what I'm saying, TypeScript's catching that X is a string. So I can't call my add function with a string. It does. So, and once again, like this is kind of why like this is a great way to review this with TypeScript, because we don't use TypeScript, but this is something, when you write this code strings.for-each x, you should kind of be like this compiler and be like, if I were to ask you what type is x, you'd say that's a string. If you do the nums.for-each and you give it this function with x in it, and I ask you what type of data is x, you'd be able to say that's a number. Is this a good way to see this? Because this is, especially with JavaScript, it's really important that this is starting to make sense. I think this is a little confusing like the first week when you're learning JavaScript, but to really explain to you how important like the data types are.
So if you like were to log that and see what it puts out, how does it add? Does it just do like 1x, or how does that work?
1x, or so what?
Like how does it make that a number actually?
Yeah, let's run this. Why isn't, how do I clear this? Okay, let me clear this and then run it again. Okay, so first what's going on, these first logs, this is from line 11. I'm going through each of my numbers, and maybe let me write this a little more not as a one-liner. I'm just gonna maybe write this so it's on multiple lines. This might make it easier to read. And then I could even store this into a variable. Let sum equal add x and 1. I don't know if that makes it easier to read, but it's doing the same thing. I'm going through each of my things in the array and I'm going to perform this function. So the function, so with a for each loop, I need to give it a function that takes a parameter. Now with TypeScript, it's smart enough, this parameter is going to be a number because I'm calling a for each loop on an array of numbers. So X is a number. And when I hover over this, it's saying parameter X of type number. So when I say sum equals add X and 1, well, X is going to be, the first time in the loop, it's going to be 1. The second time it's going to be 2. Third time it's going to be 3, etc. So that's when we log this, we get the 2, 3, 4, 5, 4. Because we're going through each of these things in the array, in our nums array, and we're just adding 1 to it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so it's just ignoring the X.
No, it's X is this right here is a function. See where that's highlighted blue? Let's do it like this. Okay, so my nums for each. I need to pass this a function, right? And the function, so the for each is a method where I pass it a function. And just to I'm going to try to pass the nums for each a 1. So I get an error here, like, hey, number is not assignable to this function. Like it's saying right here, it's expecting a function. Like I can't pass this a string. The for each method wants a function. I'm actually surprised it's not yelling at me for not giving it a parameter, but so I give it a function. This is just a anonymous, like if I could take this code right here, this function, just call it, I don't know, some func, and then paste that code there. And it's saying, it's kind of giving me this warning, hey, X is type any. I want this to be a number. So I pass my for each a function, and this for each, this sum function, it has one parameter that I'm calling X, but it's of type number. Because if I'm calling a for each loop on a numbers array, I need to pass it a function where, I have this number. I'm just calling it X. So I'm kind of using some bad names, but that's fine. X is just a number. And since X is a number, I can call the add function. And let me just some function with number, with num param. I could do another function with string param, where X is a string. Now, I can't call this add function with X because X is a string. And I also, for my, so I'm going to get rid of that. So that's an error. Just comment that out and say that's an error. And let's just go ahead and like reach. This function is going to take that string X and it's going to add like some bangs. Like this function just takes a string and just adds some bangs at the end of it. But my strings dot for each function, if I tried to pass this the, some function with num param, that's an error. Because TypeScript's smart enough, this is why it's going to fail, because I'm passing, this isn't an array of strings. And I'm passing it a function where I'm saying, hey, the parameter that you give this has to be a number. Because I'm going to call this add function, which I need to call with a number. So JavaScript, like TypeScript's going to know this is going to break, and it's going to give me that message. For my strings for each method, I need to pass it a function whose parameter is of type string. And now that works. And then if I run this, let's clear my, oh, I don't want to return this. I can just console.log this since it's a for each loop. Because what I'm really doing with this nums for with this function, it's just really adding one to the number and then logging it. But with my strings, I'm adding a whole bunch of bangs. I'm going to slack this one out. This is, I think this right here is a very good little demo to kind of wrap your head around.
So X represents each item in the array, is that right?
Technically X right here, and I'm just doing a function definition. X right here is just, I'm just saying it's a number. What's going to happen with my for each, it's going to call this function on each of the numbers. So in that case, like I do it for each, we're going to, on my nums array, we're going to start with 1. And yeah, we're going to call this function on 1. So this X becomes 1. And then we call the function again on 2, and then on 3, and then on 4. So, but technically, like just being really like, X right here, X is just a number. Like I'm writing a function who's like wants a number. So I could call this function down here. I just need to pass this function a number. But for each loop, I can pass that a function. What we can do a lot with for each loops is we don't define a function out here. We just take this function, and we just take an anonymous function and just throw it right there. And I could call this, whatever, ASD. And TypeScript's like, I don't need to say this is a number. TypeScript's smart enough to be like, that's going to be a number because I'm calling it on this nums array, which is an array of numbers. Let's just do some more examples with these. Let's maybe keep these two arrays. Let's just make this a little more simpler. Okay, so I'm gonna get rid of those. Let's do this with the map function now. Let's kind of make this one a little, go up a level. So I have I have a array of numbers and an array of strings. So first, and then, okay, I have an add function. And actually, let me go back to, I'm going to make an add bang function. I'm going to get rid of this return string. Const add bang. So this function is going to take a str, just that's the name of the parameter. This is irrelevant what I call this. The more important thing is to know that this thing right here is going to be a string. I'm creating a string and I'm just calling it whatever. I can call it X. I'm just going to do some ambiguous names. And this just returns X plus the bang. I'll have some bad syntax. Now TypeScript's smart enough to infer this, but I'm just going to explicitly say this function returns a string. So it takes in a string and it returns a string because it's just taking a string and it's adding a bang to it. So let's do our map. Well, yeah, let's just do this. Actually, I'm going to call this function, I'm going to do another one called double, just because, you know, we do this example a lot with double. So this double function, and I'm going to get rid of the add for this one. I'm just declaring a function definition. It's taking a parameter y. Once again, though, the name is really not important. What's really more important is that this is a number. Y is going to be a number. And why that's important is because then in my function, I can treat y like a number. Well, what can I do with numbers? I can do math. So I can do y times 2. And so this function is going to return a number. Because if I take a number, y, and times it by 2, that's going to return a number. Cool. So I can make a doubled, and I can go through my nums.map. And I can pass this my function double. If I try to pass this the add bang, I'm getting an error because my map function with TypeScript, you know, nums is an array of numbers. So the function I need to pass this better be a function whose parameter is a number. So add bang's not going to work because that is a string. Does that kind of, is this kind of the sink in? And then I could say, no, do another, let's just make these lets. I'll just do let for all of these. Let bangs. Well, then my bangs, I could take my strings and map and pass that the add bang function. I think we've kind of been going for a while. Let's take a little break. I think this is a really, this is if this is, if you're having having a hard time with this, I think this would be something that could be good for the homework, is to go in and kind of like challenge yourself with doing some TypeScript and just basic JavaScript. But I'm going to slack this out. We can take a little break. Does anyone have any questions? And we'll go over this when we get back from break. But let's come back at, let's just call it, I did change my clock. So let's just say 11 o'clock. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. So let's kind of continue with this example. So where we left off, we just mapping over our strings and our numbers. But let's say we want to write a function that, takes an array of numbers and it doubles that array, and adds things and returns that array. So let's just come in here, write this function const double and add things. I'm going to do some bad naming here just to kind of show us some things. So I'm going to name this poorly. So I have a variable here called strs. This is actually going to be an array of number array. So this, and I'm just going to call this, let's just call this, actually, I'm going to call this foo. Just use these names and then let bar equal foo.map. Double. Let baz equal bar dot map. Add bank. So why am I getting this error here? Well, the add bang method is expecting a string. Once again, if I do a foo.map, foo is an array of numbers. So I'm mapping over that and creating this bar variable. So here's a question. What type of, what is the type of bar? And we honestly, we don't need to look at any of the code. It's just, this is the only thing we need to look at. This could be like a coding quiz. And we would actually would need to see the double function. So I'll throw that right there.
Is it a number because it's not giving us an error?
Bar is, it's not a number. It is. So this is, I think we sometimes when I like go over examples, I name the variables very good that kind of like help kind of show what they are. But so first of all, what we need to ask ourselves is what does what is map going to do, or what is map going to return?
Array.
And then, yeah, map returns and then an array. So this is going to be, bar is going to be and then an array, but with this TypeScript and with me declaring this double function as taking a parameter that's a number, and more importantly, this double returns a number. And if I pass that to my map function, so I'm passing this double function to my map function. So it's going to go through each thing in my array and return a number. So bar is going to be, and if I hover over it, it tells me it's a number array. So bar right here, bar is an array of numbers. So I'm trying to call map once again on bar, and I'm calling this add bang. Well, add bang, remember, it's a function whose parameter is a string. Well, bar is an array of numbers. So I'm going through each number, and I'm gonna do like a 1. 1 is not a string. So that's why it's kind of yelling at me. So I would have to do something like this. I don't know. I need to now, I'm going to just write an anonymous function. And I'm going to take that y and I'm going to convert it to a string. Because now my add bang function, I'm going through each thing in my bar, which is an array of numbers. I'm now passing it this anonymous function where I'm giving it the parameter y. And notice, watch when I hover over y, it's saying y is a number. Like TypeScript's smart enough to be, hey, that's a number because bar is an array of numbers. So y is a number, but my add bang function, I need to pass that a string. And y is a number. So I'm just going to convert it to a string. And then I can return as. So let's do const Donald Bob equals double and add bang. So now this is yelling at me because this is expecting one argument. So TypeScript's also going to be like, hey, you wrote a function that is expecting a parameter. Let's give it a parameter, 1. Well, that's not a right kind. Argument of type number is not assignable to parameter type number. This function is expecting in an array of numbers when I actually call it. If I throw in anything that's not a number, it's going to break. And that's good because I'm calling this map function that's using this double function what's expecting numbers. And if I pass that, an array that has anything other than not a number, then this is going to give me unexpected results. But as long as I give this function an array of numbers, it's not going to complain at me. So let me ask you this. What type of data does this function return? It's kind of short. I hovered it.
An array of strings.
Yeah, an array of strings. And if I hover over Bob, it's TypeScript can infer that. I think in JavaScript, maybe with VS Code, it might also be able to infer that. That Bob is now in an array of strings. I could come in here and say that, might make it, and this is, it can infer it, but this can also just be nice to make this more readable. Okay, this function returns a array of strings, string array. If I said like number, it's going to give me an error because it's going through this code. It's like, do you see how like TypeScript is going through the code? It's like kind of compiling. It's like, wait, that it knows this is not going to be a string number array. It knows this is going to be a string array. So I'm just going to put this in a comment right here. Are any of these going to give me an error? Or are they both going to work? Which one's good? Which one's bad, if any? There's another question. Let me also do this. Yeah, we can do that. Any ideas?
$34 won't work.
Yeah, so let's just uncomment these. So 34 works. 33 does not. Because my Bob1 is in an array of strings. So that with the array of strings, I can pass it that method that takes a string. But I can't pass it the double. Because I can't call my double method on strings. Cool. So yeah, we don't have to use TypeScript, but like this is stuff that it's almost more that you're not using TypeScript. You have to be like more aware of this. That, what type of data you're working with. And it definitely takes practice. But as you're like going through the rest of this course, and when you're thinking about functions, it is really important to think about what type of data your function takes, what type of data it returns. Because when I hover over this, because this is, see how this method signature, it's saying double and add and bang. It's more like it takes this parameter called foo, but that more importantly is a number array, and this function returns an array of strings. So this is an error. This works. I'll throw this example out. Okay, so let's keep going. I'm going to just delete this. We'll see if we need anything. let's talk about objects. So let's have a person. Equal. Let's give them a name. Tony and an age. Notice when I hover over person, it's now smart enough to be like, oh, person is a object that has a name key, which is type string, and an age key, which is type number. We could also do this like this, do a colon, write the object name string, or name is of type string, age is a number. We'll just kind of do this three ways. Like there's like inferred type. So, we're seeing that, TypeScript can infer the type, right? I can hover over person. It knows person is this object with name and age. With a object, we can also come in here and declare it like this. Age is a number. Get rid of that thing. Doesn't like that because I have to define twice. That's another way I can, can talk about the type. And likewise, then if I did it this and tried to make age a string, then I'm going to get an error because age is a string and not a number. Another way we can do this is like create a type. So I could do something like this, like type capital. I'm going to do type person. I'm going to use this keyword type. The name, that's a string. So this is just how we work with objects, because objects can, get nested. And this is a number. So comment this one out. So then I can come here and I can say let declare an object and say, hey, this is of type. Let's just give them a name, John, equal person. So I'm declaring a variable called John, and I'm saying, hey, this is a person type. And then if I did like a console.log, like John, and I do like a dot, like the age and name are going to pop up now. Because it knows John is a type person, and it knows anything that's a type person has an age. If I throw my double function in here, I can go ahead and call my double function on John.age. I can't do it on John.name. This works. John.age is a number. Cool. So yeah, really, it's super important to, when you see John.age, I think it's almost equally as like this is a number. Because right here, when I define John, it's an object where I give this age, but the value is 12. So John.age is 12. John.name is the string John. So if I try to, and double is a function that is expecting a number that I'm just calling y. And then in my function, I can use that y to do whatever I want with that value. Here, I'm just doubling it. But y is a number. Something we can do with JavaScript in objects, say hello. I can just write a function. Console.log. Hello. Let's give that a comma. Now I'm getting an error like say hello does not exist on a person. Okay. Say hello. Function. Capital F. There we go. So a person has a say hello key on it, which is a type function. So notice when I hover over this, it's saying this void keyword. So let's just look at void really quick. Void is when a function doesn't return anything. Because functions don't have to return anything. So I could do like a const, rand func or something that returns void. I do not return anything. I don't have to say void, like if I don't have that void there and I hover over this, it has that arrow going to void. It's just, void just means I can say it. This doesn't return anything. If I say like return 1, I'm going to get an error because number is not assignable to type void. Then if I come down here and I said like let x equal, random function, over x, it's going to be void. Probably would never want to assign a variable to a function that doesn't return anything. Why would I do this? And I would assume like in like, we can change the TypeScript settings. We could probably make this fill. If we wanted to. I did not mean to go there. We go back. right now it's not failing. We could go into like the TS config probably somehow and say, hey, if don't be able to assign variables to functions that don't return anything. Because I don't know why you'd ever want to do that, because X is going to be void. So, but that's what that void keyword is. Just means your function's not returning anything. That's nice because if we do this and then we try to do something with X, this is going to break because like X is void. Or like if I tried to do like X dot, map. This is another nice thing. Like if I think X is something it's not, like I think X is an array, I try to call map over it. It's like property map does not exist on void. So that is a error. Keep on hitting Command S. So I could right here in this say hello function say void. Once again, TypeScript can infer that this returns void. Let's have another function in here. Get quotes. It's kind of a weird thing to throw in a method, but whatever. Just kind of doing some demos here. This is going to return, a string array. Return no. Let me skip these array strings. Nope. So now this is yelling at me because it quotes. See, that's a function. String array. Can I just say this is a function? This is a function. Returns string. I can even up here be more specific. I could just say, hey, this is a function. But I could actually say, hey, no, say hello is a function that returns void. I could say get quotes, and then I can get rid of these here. I could say get, a person has a say hello, which returns void. It has a get quotes. That is a function that returns strings. So let's do this. So now I can have John dot get quotes. All that. Notice how if I do a dot on that, now it's pulling me up all these array methods. Dot map. And notice even in here, it's saying the callback function, the value is a string. Like I need to give this a callback function whose value is a string, because it knows that John.getQuotes That's returning an array of strings. I'm calling .map. Well, now I want to pass that a function of x, where x is a string. And then if I do x dot, now it knows x is a string, and so it's giving me these string methods. Uppercase. If I do a dot here, what is VS Code? Because I can do a dot here. What is VS Code going, like what type of data is VS Code going to, or TypeScript, sorry, I keep saying VS Code. Which type of data structure is this going to be? It's like a math problem. Like simplify this to what data structure this is.
It's an array of strings.
Yeah, that's an array of strings. So I could, if I do a dot, it's going to give me my arrays. So I could do like a sort method. And sort on this, because that's like, it knows that's an array, or I could do a filter and so forth. And we can keep going with that. So let's just set this to a variable, let x, I don't know, x. Foo. Let's go log. Foo. I'm gonna wrap this in a string so it's easier to see where this is coming from. Foo. Oh. Sorry, this is I wrote this a little wrong because I'm using, and actually, sorry, I should have caught this because when I did, because actually, now that I think about this, when I did the dot filter, the value is, it knows the value's void. So, because foo right now is undefined. That's because how I have this set up, this map function, I need to return this. Remember with my map function, I need to give it a function that's going to return a value. Now, if I do dot filter, now it knows the value is a string because now I'm returning from this map function x dot to uppercase. And the uppercase method returns a string. So now when I do the dot filter, now it knows the value is a string. When I didn't have that return there, now this function was returning void. So when I called the filter method on this whole thing, and like look for Intellisense on like this method, let's try writing this again, filter. It's saying, how did I get that up again? Filter, no, X. And it had it up there. Filter. Yeah, there it is. It now knows that value is void because it knows this map function is not returning anything. if I were to switch this to a 1, I mean, it's kind of weird to like map over some quotes where we take a string, return a number. If I do the filter now, now it knows that value is going to be a number. Because now foo-foo, or now this whole line right here, that in the blue, that's going to be an array of numbers. Let's switch this back to x dot to uppercase. Return that, fix that little error. And now our strings are uppercase. But if I try to, let me just copy this, and I tried to do like the return add x and 1, or wait, we have a double. Name that to the one. See, x, it's saying x is a string, or double, it wants a number, but x is a string. So we're getting a error here. Because this get quote functions returns an array of strings. There it is. And double is a function that takes a number. So that's an error. Cool. So let's do this. Let's make a couple more people. So I'm going to have this John variable. That's a person. Let's make Jan 112. Okay. So now I have two objects that are type person that have these 4 keys. I'm going to comment out all of these logs. It's clean. Clear my console. I just want to make sure nothing's running. So nothing's running. So what I'm now going to do is I'm going to make a const people array. This is going to be array of, it's going to be an array of person. And this array is going to have Jan and John. Once again, if I get rid of this, TypeScript can probably going to infer that people is an array of person. But let's just explicitly say it, person array. So if I do like people, 0, and do a dot, see, it knows, TypeScript knows people at 0 is a person. So I can do age, get quotes, name. Let's do age. Let's do our double. That works. That is a TS error. If I do, so I can do like a people dot map. And notice when I write this help it's giving me, it's, hey, give this a callback function with this value key, which is going to be a type person. There's these other ones we could use, like the index is the current index that we're iterating over. We don't need that. The array is actually, we could give it an array of people, but for the map, we just really need to give it the value that I could call, turkey. So if I do turkey and I type dot, I don't know why this is see-through on this helper, but I do turkey dot and it knows, TypeScript knows that turkey is a person. So I have age, get quotes, name, and say hello. So let's grab turkey dot name. Are you starting to see, like, I'm just passing this a function where I give it a parameter. This is an anonymous function. The name doesn't matter. I can call this whatever. What really matters is I need to give this a function where this parameter I'm treating as something that's a type person. And person has a name, has an age, has a say hello, has a get quotes. Now, since I'm using TypeScript, TypeScript knows that turkey is a person because I'm calling a map function on people. So it knows turkey is going to be a person object. Or it's not that it knows, it's, hey, it needs to be a person object. So if I do something like turkey dot gobble, it's going to give me an error. And if I hover over that, it's going to say, hey, gobble does not exist on type person. Is stuff starting to like click here? I'm doing really horrible names, just hopefully so it's like kind of sinking in. And TypeScript's really nice because it gives us these errors, but we're not really using TypeScript. So this is stuff you kind of have to keep track of yourself. You have to be like, well, I'm mapping over people and I'm going to give it a function whose parameter I'm expecting to be a person. So I need to treat this parameter as that type person. And I can call it whatever, but whatever I call it, if I call it turkey, turkey does, my person class does not have a gobble method on it. And what we usually do to make this more readable is we don't name that turkey, we name that person. Because that's what that is. It's I'm expecting that to be a person. And person, then when I read that like person.gobble, that makes sense. Like a person doesn't gobble, but a person has a name. But now I need to return this. So this could be like let names equal this. If I hover over names, what is names going to be? Like what type of data structure?
Array.
Yeah, an array of what? This is where we need to get specific.
An array of strings.
Yeah, an array of strings. Cool. If I did something like, I'm just going to call this X just so we don't, that doesn't get in the way. I'm going to do a find. What type of data is X going to be? I wonder if TypeScript might not be it. TypeScript might give us two options here. Let's see. So it's going to say, hey, this is either going to be a person or it's going to be undefined. Because the find method is going to, if it matches this case, it's going to return that thing that matches the case, which would be a type person. Or if it doesn't find it, it's going to return undefined. That's what that pipe means. So this function is either going to return a person or undefined. Now, like TypeScript's not running the code. Like, I mean, I can look at the code and say, this is going to be, you know, Jan, because Jan is greater than 21. TypeScript doesn't go that far. It just knows, hey, this method find and that how you have it defined is either going to return a person or return undefined. If I switch this to filter, by X1, what is X1 going to be? It should just be an array of people, person array. Let's do a reduce function. So reduce, I see it's already telling me this is, I'm not really doing this right because I don't have the right method signature. So reduce, I need to give it a function with the previous value. So this is going to be my accumulator. So I'm just going to call this accumulator. And then like the current value should be the person. But let's just name these bad and say X and Y. So I'm going to return X plus Y dot. Notice when I do the dot, it knows Y is a person or what. So I'm going to return the age. And I need to set the default value to 0. So what it's thinking, if I don't have that 0 there, this, it's going to think X is also a person. But if I come here and set this to 0, now X is a number. And because how reduce works is this X parameter, this is really what's called the accumulator. And if I don't give this accumulator an initial value, it's going to be the first thing in the array, which would be a person. But I want to just get like, I'm trying to find the sum of all the ages. So what I say is, hey, set that accumulator's default value to 0. Now my accumulator is a number, but my Y is a person. So I'm going through each person and I'm adding their age to this accumulator. Well, that accumulator, what this returns, what this function return is going to be the next accumulator for the next call. So I'm going through all my people. I'm starting this accumulator at 0, and then I go through the first person. I add that age to the accumulator. And then on my next person, the accumulator is going to be the previous value that I returned. So this is a way I can sum it. So if I hover over x2, it's going to know that's a number. Because this is really just finding the total, like adding up the sum of the ages. But see how TypeScript's smart enough to infer that. That this is going to be a number. It doesn't know what number, it just knows that will be a number. What else could we do? That is it. Let's take another break. I think we've been going for like an hour. Let me Slack this out. How are you? Well, let's take a break and then we come back. We'll see if we want to go do some more TypeScript examples / JavaScript reviews. This really is just like a JavaScript review using TypeScript to kind of force us to think about data types and objects and functions. So let's come back at, let's call it 12:05. All right. So, how's this coming along? I think I kind of want to move on unless you want to keep going with this. We could do a quick little demo just with React with props and state. But hopefully you got something out of this. I think this, like if there's a homework assignment you don't want to redo, I think kind of messing around with TypeScript and I think could be like an acceptable thing you could work on today. But yeah, this really wasn't so much a lesson about TypeScript. This was really a lesson about, you know, just those coding fundamentals of, you know, variables, data structures, and functions. The one thing we didn't really talk about was, we talked a little about loops, I guess, but and control flow, but really when we're looking at all of this stuff, I think something when you're learning how to code, what is so important is like the data type of everything. And so hopefully this was a good example, just kind of showing, and this is what you should kind of be doing what TypeScript's doing. You know, where you might not know exactly like what, like I don't know what this sum is going to be here in the reduce, but I know that this x2 variable is a number. I might not know the names in this map function, but I know that this map function, I'm going over an array of people and returning their names. And so that should be an array of strings. And then, because then that way, when I have this names variable, I can, that is just in an array of strings, and then I can, you know, do a for each method on it. So if I do a for each method, and then I do that past that, a function, well, now I need, since names is in an array of strings, I need to treat X like a string, or else it's going to break or give me unexpected results. All right. Yeah, so for the rest of class, let's just do a little React review, really step into state and props. Well, before I do, were there any questions on this example or any other examples before this? Oh, cool. So let's just, yeah, create a React app really quick. So yarn create React app. I'll just call this state and props. Let's open this up and go. Okay. So I'm just going to go to my app.js and delete all of this stuff inside of here. And let's make a component. Let's call this like demo1.js. Import React. I'm going to start this one out really simple. So I'm going to give this a name. Like this is expecting a name prop. So I'm not going to set type. We're not going to do TypeScript with React. But if I were, I mean, this is not the way to do it, but let's just kind of like look at like this. In this component, I could have like, I could kind of say like, you know, we have the type props. Or maybe I could expect there to be a, props is just an object. And there's going to be a name key on this object that is going to be a type string. Something we didn't talk about with TypeScript, because I didn't want to like get too much into TypeScript. I could do like another key, we'll just call it X, and do a question mark and say that's a string. We'll just say like the question mark means it is optional. So because with props, we have a lot of times we have a lot of optional props, like essentially like always optional. But we'll just say like we're expecting to get a name, but you know, we could have some optional ones. But it's kind of the same thing, like where like we want, you know, we have this props object and we're kind of expecting these keys, like name, X, and Y. But also as importantly as their name or what we're calling them, and so I'm not overloading name, let's do title. You know, what's more as equally as important as the name of the prop is the type of data it is. Like it's equally as important as the name. So I'm having a title prop, but the title prop is really, I'm just expecting that to be a string. I could have an X prop. I'm expecting that to be a string. I have a Y prop. I'm expecting that to be a number. And the reason why like the type is, once again, just hopefully you saw this from the TypeScript demo, because now like this component, you know, it's getting this props object and now it has this Y. And maybe I want to do some math with that. So I'm expecting this Y, and I'm going to comment this out because that's going to not be valid JavaScript, but it's really important as you're writing your components, like, and you're giving them these props, you know, they're going to have a name, but they're also going to have a type. And props, this is just a JavaScript function. I could call this Z. That's going to work. Let's just do that just to be obnoxious. And really what this is, the type is like demo1 props. So Z would be of type demo1 props. This isn't going to work because this isn't a JavaScript, this isn't a TypeScript file. But does that, after talking about TypeScript, I'm writing a function whose parameter is this thing I'm calling Z, which is really this type like this type of data, which is just an object that has title, which is a string, and it has X and Y, which is a string and a number. And these X and Y's are optional. Because maybe in my code, I'm going to do like, I'm going to just make sure like z dot y is there before I try to do this code. Like I do like a z dot y and so they don't have to give me this y prop because I'm doing like a little check. If it's there, y was given. Doing that, whatever. So when we're writing a functional component, this is kind of what I'm doing. This is just a function whose first argument, I'm calling z. I'm expecting this. This is just going to come at like, it's going to be, I can treat it like an object of type, and I'm just calling it demo1 props, which is this object. Are there any questions on this? Obviously, I can't do that. That's not going to work because I can't, that's like TypeScript, not in a TS file. But this works. So then in my app.js, I can grab that demo1 component. And now, normally it's kind of like a little weird. Well, why don't we just call it like a function, where we pass in an object with like title, etc. But this is just JSX. It's just how React chose to do this. Instead of it writing it as a function, we do it as a component, and then we can pass down the actual prop. So I need to match the name of the prop. So we have the title prop. And then this is like my string value here. And then we had a y prop. Remember, y needed to be of type number. So, because I'm going to do math on it. So I give it a y prop and make sure it's a number. Demo1 component 1.
Can you only pass props through a component if you don't use like the use state and stuff like that?
Can I only, will you repeat that?
Can you only pass props through into a component? You can't pass them any other way, like through a link or something else.
You can pass, I mean, the word prop, yeah, I can only, this is me passing a prop down. There's, it's mainly, I guess what you're asking, can you pass data to a component? Like this is one way I can pass data through to a component is through props. With like the link, we don't have this installed, but with like the link component, I don't know off the top of my head, especially with like the new React router. There's a way I can like have a link. I can pass data to that link. I forget how they do it, but it's like, it used to be something like, I don't know, I'm just gonna make it up. There is a way to do it like data to send. But yeah, it's not like props because we don't get it in the component. Like if I had, let's say we have a link that takes us to our demo 1 page, and this is the React router link. And I want to send it like, you know, some data. I can do that. I forget how to do it off the top of my head. I think it's, I don't know. It used to be in the to method, but let's just say this is how you do it. It's like path or whatever data. It might be something with like location, but anyway, I don't know if this is not right, but in our link component, there's some prop we can give it where we can give that prop data. But then in our component, how we'd actually grab it is with a hook, like location, where we could pull off the, you know, the X value from that. So I don't know off the top of my head, but it's a little different because in the demo 1 component, with that specific thing, I'm not going to access it through this prop, which I'm calling Z right here. I'm not going to get it through that. I have to get it a different way from how React Router tells me to get it. Does that make sense? It's kind of like, it's also like the same way with our provider. With our provider, I wasn't getting the data through props, but I was able to get it with like the use context hook, you know, with the provider or with the whatever X context. So I don't know, like, I think, yeah, if this is the only way to pass props to my component is like this, but there's other ways to get data to my component that are going to follow their own, you know, ways. And yeah, two examples of that would be the link component with the React router and our provider demo that we did. Does that answer your question?
Yes. Just the different ways of pulling that in, I think, is where I get really confused sometimes.
Yeah. So this right here is just because, yeah, I think the way you asked your question, like you're treating like props as like maybe you're thinking like with the provider, like our provider is providing props to our component. So and that's like props are right here. Like we have a component. I'm like rendering my demo 1 component right here, and I'm passing it props. With the provider, it's like I do give in my provider that does have that value prop in the provider, but then when I utilize the provider, I'm going to get that data through the use context hook. So yeah, I definitely see where it's can be confusing because, you know, our provider would look something like this, where we, you know, let's say we had like the auth context, you know, dot provider component, where we do give that a value prop. Let's just do a turkey. I'm all about turkey today. And then, you know, we do like props.children. So here's like my made up provider. That would be in like its own file. And let's say I wanted to grab, so this provider does have a value prop. I'm giving like this has the prop value, but this is how like this component works. Like this auth context.provider component wants a value prop. You know, that's just how it works. And then we give it that object, and then we can do other things, give it more stuff here. But then when I utilize this, let's just say this is, I don't know, turkey context. Just making this up. You know, this is how I could grab those, like the data. Let's pretend like this is like the turkey context, turkey provider. Then I'd be able to grab like data.turkey and data.z. So my provider has a value prop, but in my component where I want to use that, I use the use context hook. And then I can essentially, you know, grab that value. So that data really becomes that. And now I have turkey and Z. And that's just how they set that up to work. But with this, not talking about like React router or providers, just kind of like a basic React demo. Yeah. When I create my own component, this functional component, I'm calling this Z. It's just norm. Yeah. And you would never always call this props just because that's what you should call it. But I'm just showing you it doesn't. This is just a function. This is just a parameter to our function whose name really doesn't matter other than for us reading it. What's I'd say more important than the name of whatever we're calling this is what are you expecting this to be? And with a React component, this parameter that we usually call props is always going to be, we can treat it like an object because it's once it gets here, it's going to be an object. But what does that object look like? Well, in this demo case, I have an object that has these keys with these two types, and maybe the X and Y props or keys in here that I could also call props. Maybe I don't have to have those. They're kind of optional. But like I'm really expecting to get title. And you know, the nice thing about if this was TypeScript and you know, we make this required, if someone tried to like use our component without getting a title, we would get like an error. Title required. Because maybe there's some props that we like, maybe there's one we like you have to have defined. We don't do that. So it's kind of on us. You know, if I do have a prop that I have to have defined, well, whenever I use that, I just better make sure I give it to it. So it's kind of on you as the developer to keep track of that. So let's go run this. Yarn start. Demo one's not defined. I need to close this. Let's import demo one. Fetch. Oh, I guess I didn't put that demo one. But let's say, and like just kind of going back to like why the data type's so important and why you got to keep track of that. So I'm coming in here, let's create another demo one component. You know, broke. Because if I come in here, like this has a Y prop that I'm expecting it to be a number because in my demo.js, I'm doing math on this Y prop. And I give this like, I don't know, like an empty array. that's 11. Like, why is that? How is that even working? Like, that's a little confusing. Can you just add? That is a doozy over there. What if I have something in there? Oh my gosh. Okay, yeah. This is going like, so if I have, if it's empty, like how the hell does, why that works, I have no idea. Why does that return the string 12? Would you ever like expect that? That is so confusing. If we give it like a string. We give it an array of objects. It's just adding that. But this is the type of thing like this works. That's kind of scary that works because for some reason, let's say, yeah, you accidentally, instead of passing that in a number, for some reason you pass that an array of numbers. Now it's working, but it's probably not supposed to be working. This happens if I pass it in the object. Yeah, this is where JavaScript's a little scary, like, because none of this stuff is breaking. Did you see with like the TypeScript example, why it's kind of good to break? You can kind of catch those errors earlier. Like none of this is breaking. It's actually not even breaking in my UI. I wonder if Ruby like allows you to add a hash. So if I go to like Ruby or IRB, like what's an array plus one? Thank you. Like Ruby breaks. It's like, what the hell are you trying to do? Like that in my mind is good. That breaks. I tried to do like a hash plus one. That breaks. If I go into JavaScript, for some reason, JavaScript's like, yeah, let's, sure. An empty array plus one is the string one. That makes so much sense, right? That is, or like, yeah, that is silly. I guess it's just the value set. Oh my God, that is horrible. It's the values separated by commas, and then the last one, you just add the number to it. Okay.
At some point, I would like to review like what the difference is between passing over something that's spread out over an object versus passing the whole object. I forget what the importance of that is.
Cool. Yeah, we can do that right here. So let's say, yeah, because something that happens a lot is, you know, we do an Axios call and we get back like an array of objects, right? Or we just have an object. So for example, I could have like demo one data. This could be an object. what would this object look like? I'm going to get rid of these examples. What if because remember how we defined it in our definition, what do we expect this object to look like? Anyone? Like here, I want to actually create some actual demo one data. Remember here we have the type of like the props or the data. It has a title key, which is a string. It has these two other ones that are optional. So we have a title. This should be a title, actual title here. I mean, this should be a string, but that's a string. We have the X that was optional. We're expecting that to be a string, so it's X string here. And then we had Y, and that was supposed to be a number. Right, this is just a JavaScript object. Then throw that in my console, and do actual data dot title, etc. Right. So I could come in here and I could say title equals, I could create another component that uses this object dot title. Could do the X equals actual demo data dot X, and I could do Y equals actual demo data dot Y. There we go. There's my actual title here, and there's it doing math. So that is a valid way to do that. But let's say this had like 30 things on it. Well, this is going to get obnoxious to do. And a lot of the times, like here's kind of like the key. A lot of the times, like the type, when we're creating this demo one component, we're probably going to match this to like a model in our database. Or like you think we could have a model in our database called demo one model that has a title key. Like in our database, we have a title, we have an X, and we have a Y. So it's common that we do an Axios call, or somehow we like end up with an object that we got from an Axios call, or we just had that's just available to us. And so instead of coming here and writing this out this long way, what we can do is just pass them down like this. Just spread out over those. It's called like spread out over this object, and can pass them down as props. So these two things do the exact same thing. So if I have like something that's an object that I want to pass down as props, and the keys in this object match what I'm defining them in here, then I can do this. But if in my demo1.js, I change this to like title, like z.titles, well, that's not going to match, because now that my object here that maybe I got from my Axios call or wherever does not match how I have it in my component. So I would have to do it like this, titles right there equals actual demo1.title. Because if I look at this one, with it spelled as titles with a Z, and so that one has titles with a Z. I need to save this. This one gets it because I actually changed the prop name there. But this one is not going to get it because this title does not match that. But I'm sure if you've noticed this, like a lot of the times, especially when you're like doing Axios calls and you're like rendering these specific components, a lot of the time they do match. Let's do let me do this little brain teaser for you. I'm going to do another component, demo 2.js. Demo 2. I'm just going to call this props. That gets its props return div demo 2. Export default demo 2. I'm going to do this inside of here. I'm going to render this demo 2 component. I'm going to do this .z. What if I do like something like this? I mean, what would you kind of expect my props to look like in the demo 2 component? Like if I kind of wanted to do the same thing here, like kind of type demo 2 props. What is that going to look like? Based off of the fact, like, this is how I plan on using it. Like, that's how I plan on using it. Does that question make sense? So here's me using it. You can kind of see this. I know, like, you can actually kind of derive it just from this page, but.
Will it not be the same?
Yeah, this one would kind of be the exact same. I mean, this is a silly example, but yeah, it would pretty much be the exact same as these props. Because what I'm doing, I'm just taking the props that demo 1's getting and just passing them all down to demo 2. So any prop that demo 1 gets, it's going to just give it on to demo 2. So yeah, I kind of expect that to be the same.
What if you were to pass that through without spreading out Z? Would you ever do that?
Well, once again, the other way to do that would be title equals z.title and so forth.
You would never just say like, there's Z.
There's never just z.
Like I'm asking you, like, if you were to just have curly bracket Z curly bracket, you would never send that over like that.
I could do z like that.
Yes.
Yeah. So okay. So let's do it this way, because this is valid. So, but it does, what do my props look the same?
Like, so now you're sending over an object instead of an array, right?
There's no, so the props, this in the component, this is always the root level, parent level, it's always going to be an object with the React functional component. This props, or Z as we called it in the other one, it's always going to be an object. But there is a difference between doing both we could get to work, but there's a difference between these two. So this was the one we just looked at. So if we did it like this with the ... Z, that kind of type object is going to look like this. So it's going to look the exact same. But if I do it like this way, where I have a prop called Z set equal to Z, this changes it, how we're going to get our props here. Our props is going to look like this. It's still going to be an object, but it's going to have this Z key, which is going to be this object. So if I wanted to grab the title, I'd have to do props.z.title. Because here I'm giving it a prop, I'm calling it Z, and the value is Z.
What if you just pass it Z in curly brackets without Z equals?
Just do it like Z.
Or in curly brackets, or I don't know if it needs that.
That's not going to work. That's a syntax error. If I just give it Z, I think, what is that going to do? I don't think that's going to work. Well, actually, okay, so let's get this working, because, okay, so let's do Z equal to Z. Let's make sure this is working. And I think I have in here, I need to comment out that. And then just to clean this up, let's only have one of these rendering, so it's not so confusing. And I just want to make this easy to see. Okay. So there's the name demo1 component. We're passing that down demo1 component. That's working. Props.z.title. Because in our demo1 component, when we do the demo2 component, we pass it as a prop called Z. If I just do this as Z, I don't think that's going to work. It doesn't cause an error. Like what this is doing is we now have a Z prop, but there's really no value on it. So I'll do something like this. Z and, or sorry, I'll call this props.z. So the Z prop was given, but it doesn't have the title. Like if I go back to demo one, Z, and notice the coloring, Z is not red, Z is orange. This is the prop name Z. It has nothing to do with this Z. Does that make sense? So this is the prop, that's the value. if I try to just do in bracket Z, that's not going to give me an error. Or it should. Let's save that. Yeah. Okay, there's my error. Because now I have a value, but it doesn't have like it definitely does like it doesn't have it doesn't know what that is. Like what prop does that belong to? I mean, it could be X. We could call that X. And then in my demo 2, I would do props.x.title, props.x. And then that would look like my demo props would be expecting this X key. But if I spread out over this ... Z, that's like me going through and saying title equals z.title. X equals z.x. Y equals y.x. So these two would do the same thing. This is different, but this is another way I could pass down this prop, this Z data. Like this would work. We would get that to work. We'd have to kind of change it up a little by accessing the title off of the X prop that we set equal to Z. And you know, you will see, let me just go ahead and rename Z to props. Because you will see this, you'll see a function that gets props. And you'll see another component in there using like that, and it just gets like all props are just passed down. It's not uncommon. I am going to switch this back to props. So where I was using that Z, now it's called props. So yeah, that, if you had your choice, which way do you want to write this? Like, yeah, no, you're probably never going to write it like this. For now, it's fine if like this makes more sense. But once you realize these two things are the same thing, then you know you're always going to write that like this. Because what you might see is like you can do stuff like this. You can pass all the props that was given to this component, give them down to the second one. Now you can do, and then you can also add extra ones as well. So now this demo component, you know, it would look like this. Those props, you know, you would expect to get title, X could be optional, Y could be optional, and now you have here like an extra one. Just type string. Now I got to change that because now that I'm using the spread notation, I just have that directly. Z is not defined. I'm gonna not save something here. Props.title. Does that weird example kind of help explain some of that prop stuff? I think this really does relate good to what we were talking about with TypeScript. When you're creating your component, we have this thing called props. It's just a name. Like the name is so irrelevant. We just call it props. The more important thing is for each component, what that props object is. Like for this demo too, for some reason, you know, I have a title prop that's going to be a string. It's going to be able to X prop, Y prop extra. And then when I use it, when I render it, then, you know, I can give it those props. Like there's an X prop that it should be able to handle. It should be a string. Two. And then in my demo one component, I can give that, I'm going to get rid of this. This is going to break stuff because now I'm using it two different ways. I can take this demo component too. I can give it all the props that was given to one and then more stuff if I want. So now my demo two component, yeah, it should just be the exact same as, you know, this demo one. It's getting those same props, but then we have an extra one. Sweet. I think this is a good place to stop. We can continue more with this tomorrow and like maybe get a little more into state. I do have a good idea for like a demo for state because I think and how that relates to props because I think that's one of the, I think on their own state and props are not that bad. I think it's like when you combine them in different ways you can kind of use them together, I think it can definitely get a little confusing. But maybe since we just talked about props and not state, maybe that makes that a little more clear because they're really not related. They're like two different things. So we didn't do anything with state in this demo, just props. Any questions with this before we head out to lunch? I would recommend, yeah, not for your final project or for like a hackathon, but maybe while you're working, and it's definitely probably not with group work. That's where you definitely get in trouble with group work with this. But if you're working alone on a project, I think, you know, naming stuff poorly can really help you out. Because it kind of like gets you to think about what is actually what. But yeah, the moment you start working with someone else and you have stuff that's named poorly, then it's just a disaster because variables like X and Y that don't really, or foo and bar, you know, they're good to kind of explore, but it's it can be very confusing when you're working with someone else if they're just have random horrible variable names. Cool. Was this good? Is this a good review? Is this like something starting to click? Maybe that didn't click the first couple weeks. I think you would be like really like, yeah, for the, and I'll iterate this again tomorrow, but like for your break, I think it's gonna be beneficial if you maybe just go through some of the basic stuff. Go through like JavaScript basics, Ruby basics, React basics. Just to kind of go help, you know, fill in some of those holes. Cool. Well, that is it for me. You can take off for lunch. And we will see you at 2 o'clock.
Thank you.
Have a good one.